This is my largest Dizzy bowl creation, produced utilizing the techniques that I have been perfecting over the past few months. It started out from 8-inch wide laminated boards that consisted of 121 laminated wood strips. From this laminated board, 96 laminated discs, each 100,000th of an inch thick, were cut and reassembled back together to produce this 11-inch tall Dizzy bowl. The project took more than 3 weeks to complete. This video is a little longer than most of my videos, because I not only wanted to demonstrate the entire process of producing a large Dizzy bowl project, but I also wanted to reveal the techniques that I learned and perfected in the process of making a number of other Dizzy bowl patterns over the past few months. The process begins with the production of the laminated board. I'm ready to make some larger of these Dizzy bowls. These bowls are about 4 inches in diameter, about 5.5 inches tall, and contain about 60 pieces of wood per layer. I'm going to make some larger versions of these from this set of boards that I cut on the Accu-Slice system. I said these boards are all cut in the Accu-Slice system from all different varieties of wood. They're 1 3/4 inches thick by 30 inches long, and they vary in thickness from about 20 thousandths up to about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now I did put my wider boards in the center, because what I noticed in making these bowls is the center pieces don't change in the width. Or you don't get these fancy patterns here from the center pieces. They're from the outer pieces. So it's much easier to have wider pieces in the center. It's easier to align it when you're gluing it up, and so that's why all my wider boards are in the center, and then my smaller boards to get these patterns will be on the outside. They said there's 121 pieces of wood in this assembly, so it's going to take at least 3 glue-ups to glue this up. So I'll be gluing this up in my jigs. I have 2 glue-up jigs I've made for gluing it up, and once again I'll be using epoxy for the glue-up process. The pattern for this Dizzy bowl is symmetrical. In other words, the left and right boards are exactly the same going into the center. The center board is a piece of walnut about 1/8 of an inch thick, and beside that are 2 pieces of yellow heart, followed by some padauk, followed by some maple, followed by some purple heart, and then going out in a symmetrical pattern from there all the way to the outside. I'm ready to begin the glue up of my boards for my large Dizzy bowl project, and I divided my boards into 3 groups of about 40 pieces of wood, and I'll be gluing each set up in 3 separate groups, and then once they're all glued up, I'll glue the 3 pieces together to make a final board. I'm gluing these up using my glue-up jig that I made in a previous video. I actually have 2 of these jigs. I have this one here, and another system back here. And when I use this, I do put some wax paper over my jig to keep it clean, because the epoxy gets over everything. In fact, that's why I'm using this disposable smock and gloves. I don't want to get epoxy over everything. So I keep everything nice and clean, that the epoxy doesn't get on any of my jig parts. I am using the West epoxy system, and again I like this system because it has about an hour setup time. It gives me plenty of time to glue my pieces and then put in my jig, let them dry overnight. And I'm using the epoxy, and I'm putting my glue on with a foam brush. I'm coating both sides of the wood strips with epoxy and then stacking them up. I determined that 40 wood strips will take me about 30 minutes to glue and assemble, which is the maximum time I want to allow before the epoxy starts to thicken and harden. They're all glued up, and you saw my foam brush just gave out at the end. But I got all 40 layers glued in about 30 minutes. The glued laminated strips are transferred to the glue-up jig and cradled in a sheet of wax paper to keep the epoxy glue from contaminating the glue-up jig. The glued laminate boards are clamped with C-clamps and allowed to dry and cure overnight. The other two sets of laminated boards are glued up in the same manner. Okay, I just run these glued up laminated sections through the joiner to clean up the excess glue on the surface. I have my 3 sections of laminated boards ready to glue these 3 sections together. And I mix up some epoxy and I'll clamp them with some regular bar clamps. The resulting laminate board is too wide to go through my joiner, so I have to do the getting the excess glue off the surface and getting it flat on my drum sander. I have my laminated board, which has all been glued up. There's 121 pieces of wood in here, and the overall width is about 7 3/4 inches, and it's about 29 inches long. So I began the design of my bowl by first of all using the Woodturner Pro software to lay out the pattern for my design, because I want to make the maximum use of my wood. So out of this 29-inch board, I was able to get 4 discs, starting at 7 3/4 inches, going down to a 7-inch disc. And out of each of these discs, I've cut center disc. And so this is my pattern laid out in the Woodturner Pro software. I actually show 20 layers of this laminated board on this drawing, but actually each of these 20 layers is composed of 5 layers, each 1/10 of an inch thick. So I have actually 100 pieces of disc I'm going to be gluing together for this large bowl. So I laid it out in the Woodturner Pro software, and I'm starting with a 7 3/4 inch disc, and out of that 7 3/4 inch disc I'm also cutting a 6-inch and a 4-inch disc. Then I have a 7.5 inch disc, and I'm cutting a 5.5 and a 3-inch disc, and out of my 7 1/4 inch disc I'm cutting a 5 1/4 and also a 2-inch disc. And out of my last 7-inch disc, I'm cutting an additional 5-inch disc. So I have a total of 11 discs I'll be cutting from this board. But I probably won't even use this small 2-inch disc. So this is all ready now to go to the scroll saw. And I'll use a scroll saw to cut out each of these discs and then get ready to start slicing them off on the Accu-Slice system to make the individual layers. Each will be a 1/10 of an inch thick. Okay, I'm ready to begin my scroll saw cutting of these boards. I did cut out 1 disc already. I'm using the scroll saw with a 10 teeth per inch blade to do the outside rings. I'll probably change to a smaller blade to do the inner rings, so I have to drill a smaller hole. So, in cutting these on a scroll saw, I want to cut as close as possible to my line, but yet still have the line showing. Then I'm going to take this to my edge sander and sand it right to the line. It's quite nice if the disc is as close to being perfectly circular as possible. It just makes up gluing in my jig when I do the gluing much accurate. So to make sure this is really good, I want to even make my line a little bit darker so I can see it more easily as I'm cutting. Especially when you're cutting on these darker woods, it's hard to see the line. And once again, I cut it close to the line, but not the line is still showing. And then I'll take this to my edge sander and sand it right to the line so it's perfectly round. Okay, I'm ready to sand these round on my disc sander. And I did mark my line again a little bit darker so I can make sure I can see it. And I'll sand it right to the line again to get this as perfectly round as possible. To cut out the center disc, I first of all switched to a different blade on my scroll saw. I went to a 19th per inch blade, which I can use a 16th inch drill to drill my first hole. So I'm drilling a 16th inch hole, and I'm going to drill it right on the line. Okay, I switched to a smaller blade, and I drilled my hole through my board. Well, we cut all our round disc from that laminated board on the scroll saw. Most of these are hollow, and then some of these I took pieces out of the center. And these 10 discs will each be cut into 10 pieces, 100,000th inch thick. So I have a total of 100 discs that I'll be using to make my bowl that I designed in the Woodturner Pro software package. So the next step is to slice these on the Accu-Slice system. Now I could attach these to a fence with double-sided tape, but I want to make absolutely sure I don't lose any, and I want to get the maximum use of my board. I don't want to be cutting in any tape. So therefore I'm going to actually glue these to some MDF sheets, and then I'll cut those on the Accu-Slice system. Okay, I'm ready to cut off the slices on my laminated disc, and I'll be cutting off slices 100,000ths of an inch thick. You know, and that's what I got out of those two boards, 10 and 10. We have our discs that have all been cut on the Accu-Slice system. I have 10 sets of discs here, and I have between 10 and 11 discs from each of the different sizes. So our next step is to sand the fuzzies off the edges, both the inside and outside edges, and get rid of the burr where it kicks out on the Accu-Slice system on the bandsaw. So we'll get those cleaned up, and then I need to make some jigs for gluing these up so we can finish gluing up the segments to make our project. I don't normally sand the surfaces of my discs because they're smooth enough coming off the Accu-Slice system, they don't need it. But I do get a burr off the Accu-Slice system, and I'm a little concerned on doing these big discs that they're pretty fragile. And so I have this sand fleece system I bought probably 5 years ago. Haven't used it a lot. It's stuck back here in the corner, but this works pretty nice for cleaning off the burr on the edge of my disc, and also gives the surface a light sanding just in case I might need it. And that cleaned up that burr nice. Just a single pass on each side, and actually got rid of most of the fuzzies on the edge too. Won't take much more to clean those up. Early on I described cutting out these discs after I made my laminated strips. It was very important to get these discs as round as possible. So I drew a circle with a compass, and then I cut it close to that line, and then sanded it right flush to that line so to get these discs as perfectly round as possible. And this is important for the glue-up jig, because I can make a jig that I can rotate these, yet at the same time have almost no slop in the jigs, so that when I rotate these and clamp them, the disc doesn't slip and slide, and I get nice accurate joints in gluing these up. So to accomplish this, I did some making of these jigs on the drill press to get these things perfectly aligned, and let me show you how that was done. have my first disc here, and I'm going to be making it to fit this disc. And I have my disc here with positions for 8 holes. And I have my circle here, which is my diameter of my ring. And I drilled 2 holes already into this, spaced one apart. In other words, not drilling in there, but drilling here and here. And I drilled just till it meets the line. And I'm using these 8-penny finishing nails, and I've ground the head off, and these take a number 37 drill. That these nails will go into the hole snugly, but I can easily add them and remove them if I need to. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking my disc, I'm pushing it up against those 2 nails, and I'm going to drill a hole with the disc still in here, just on the edge of this disc. So that gives me a nice tight joint when I'm gluing these up. I want it tight enough that it rotates, but yet not tight enough that I can't rotate it. So let me go ahead and drill this first hole. I'm pushing the disc against the 2 nails, and I'm going to get the drill aligned that it just clears the edge of my disc. Now when I put a nail in there, that disc is basically snug. There's no movement, yet I can still rotate it. So when I glue this up, they're not going to slip and slide. So let me go and drill the rest of the holes to complete this, and put the nails in all the holes. And if I were to get one, say it was too tight, I can always drill another hole, like a 1/4 inch away, you know, either in or outer if I want it looser or tighter. So I have a little bit of play here, in case I do mess up and don't get it quite tight enough or make it too tight. I can always drill a second hole. So I have a system here where it's snug and almost no play in it. So now I can put the rest of my disc in here, and you can see they're nice and snug. So it'll make a nice glue up jig, and I'll get very accurate joints when I'm gluing this up. Okay, I have all 10 of my glue up jigs made. And as I said, I have put a piece of plastic in the bottom here, so when I glue these up, I don't get the disc glue into the plywood. But these things are so nice and snug. They really, I have less than, you know, maybe 1 or 2 thousandths clearance around there. These can still turn, but yet they don't move. So they'll clamp up real nice, and I'll get real nice accurate joints when I glue these up. Over the past few weeks, I made a number of dizzy bowl projects, some of these eggs and bowls, and I've really been playing around with the angle of rotation. What is the best angle of rotation? It looks good, gives a nice, pleasing pattern. And it really is a combination of 2 factors. One is the width of the boards, and also it's a function of the diameter of your bowl. My strips used to make my laminate boards vary between 1/8 of an inch and down to 20 thousandths of an inch. And my layers are all 100 thousandths of an inch thick. So in this particular bowl, I rotated it, I think it was 4 degrees. And the lines are pretty much straight. They're not much of an angle. So that was 4 degrees. This was 6 degrees, which worked pretty well for this size bowl. When I went to 8 degrees, they're even more horizontal, and I don't like that as well. So I think 6 degrees for this size bowl works quite nicely. However, in this bowl now, I'm going to an 8-inch diameter bowl, so it's going to change quite a bit. So I did some drawings in SketchUp, and I've been playing back and forth between a 3-degree and a 4-degree rotation. And I think I'm going to go with the 3-degree. And I lined one up here based on my drawing. I put my boards on my drawing and determined my angle. And this is 3 degrees. And I think this came out pretty well. That angle is about 45 degrees, which I think will work quite nicely for this particular bowl. So I don't want to go at any more than that, so I think I'll stay with the 3 degrees. Now it's also quite important, as you see, you need a nice contrasting board so you can get these things aligned properly. I have my glue up jig, but I need something I can easily see to align it, and some of these contrasting woods will give me a nice pattern that's easy to see. Turns out that the yellow heart's kind of hard to see, and even walnut's hard to see. You need something that stands out nice, like the Padauk or Red Heart or even Purple Heart is easier to align. It's pretty hard sometimes to align these things. It's hard to see the contrast. So what I tried here, a couple things. I did on my yellow line here, my yellow heart, I put a black line the whole way down. You can see it on there, which is a little bit better. And these are all angled at 3 degrees. But a better indication right now is those red lines. You see the red against the white, nice contrast. That's what I'm probably going to be used to align these discs as I'm gluing it, because it's right on. Yeah, I'm ready to start the glue up of these first set of discs. And I did go over the edges with this with some 220 grit sandpaper just to make sure all the fuzzies were gone. Glue is applied to each of the discs, and they are added to the glue-up jig one layer at a time. The discs are aligned to the rotation pattern as previously planned. Spring clamps are applied while making sure that the discs do not slide or move when the clamps are applied. I normally check the alignment on the opposite sides of the disc. The clamp discs are allowed to set for at least 5 minutes before the next layer is added. The process is continued until all 5 layers have been glued. After the glue is set for at least 5 to 10 minutes, the set of 5 discs is taken to the clamp press. I just put it in the press between sheets of wax paper. This clamping ensures that the discs remain flat and the sides parallel to one another during the glue drying process. And I'll apply some pressure to it. And let that dry overnight. All our laminated discs have been glued up into sets of 5 discs and rotated at the appropriate angle. And I have a total of 18 of these 5-layer discs, and some of the discs at the bottom actually contain 6 layers. So I have a total of 96 layers of laminated disc in this bowl. Plus I also have a top and bottom ring, which are made from some segmented Catalux wood. In this case, it's 24 segments in this disc. And I may actually create a feature strip in this when I get closer to finishing it. I took each of these discs, and after they came out of the gluing jig, I did sand the edges lightly to get rid of the excess glue so I can more easily see the edges to accurately align this when I'm doing it on the lathe. So the next step is to take this to the lathe and start gluing it up one layer at a time, starting at the base. And I'll glue up probably 5 or 6 layers and then turn the inside and then finish the rest of the bowl. I am using a faceplate for this project. I have a 6-inch faceplate, which I have a block screwed onto this, and I've already glued up my base plate. This is a 24 segment Catalux ring, solid ring for the base. And I have my first bottom layer ready to glue on, and I mounted this on my rotating tailstock in a chuck. And I'll just be gluing this to the base, so that's the next step. Glue is applied to both surfaces, and the 2 layers are clamped together on the lathe. The discs are allowed to set and dry for at least 15 minutes before the next layer is added. Well, the thing I just did, I made some alignment marks. I put a mark here and a mark here with one of these felt pens, so I can accurately align it, and I mark those lines on both sides so I can double check it on both sides. Okay, I have the first 7 layers glued together, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the inside mainly because it's much easier to turn it now while it's much shallower. It's hard to, when I'm going to have an 11-12 inch bowl on here, it's going to be pretty hard to turn at the inside, so I'll do that inside now, and maybe I'll do some of the outside just to get some basic shape here also. Okay, now I'm going to turn the outside of this a little bit, not to get the final shape, but just to get these edges off to see the pattern of the laminated boards. Okay, that's not the final shape. I'll be taking off more, especially down here in this middle later on. But just to see the pattern that we're getting, looks pretty nice. The inside, the bottom is pretty much done here. So I'll just keep adding layers at this point to get some more layers on, and probably turn one more turn before I do a final turning on it. Okay, I'm going to switch to my larger cold jaw chuck to fit these larger pieces. Once again, I marked points on here so I can accurately align them. So I just glued on 5 more layers and let this dry overnight. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this down, both the inside and the outside, just to get a basic shape. So. Now there's another 4 layers on there. I just finished turning the inside, so now I'm going to do the outside on this. Okay, now we're ready to glue on the final 3 layers. I added my final 2 layers of the laminated boards, and then I put a set of rings on the top, 2 solid rings with a spaced ring in the middle to give it some additional detail. I also added my system to give it more stability when I'm turning. This carbon multi-rest system. This bowl's so big now, I get a little more vibration, especially when I'm cutting this outer ring. That'll reduce the vibration, so it'll turn a little bit nicer. So now I'm ready to finish this. I'll start with the inside and the outside to get this top done. Now that completes the top of the bowl, both the inside and the outside. Now I want to move my steady rest into here and move my tool post rest over here and finish up the bottom. I want to neck this down a little bit more at the bottom here, and of course finish the base. So that's the next step. Well, I finished the base. I took it down, smoothed it out some, took this neck down a little bit more, detailed in some detail on the base. So let me sand it now and then cut it off, and this hopefully will be done. I sanded the bowl starting with 180 grit sandpaper down to 400 grit sandpaper, followed by 4/0 steel wool. Well, there's the bowl all sanded inside and out. And we'll just cut it off, finish cutting it off, and put a couple coats of bush oil on it. Okay, here's the finished bowl, and now we'll give it some bush oil treatment. And there's our bowl with 1 coat of the bush oil. Give it a couple more coats, let it dry a day or 2, and then I'll put some polyurethane on it.